Welcome to Sidebar, a podcast by Courthouse News. I'm your host, Josh Russell, coming to you from New York City, where I'm enjoying a day off from our daily reporting on the lurid and unctuous Sean Diddy Combs trial.
How are you, Josh?
And that unidentified urbane voice you hear is Hillel Aaron from sunny Los Angeles.
Yeah, it's heating up here.
How is LA these days?
Pretty good, except we're broke.
Oh, yeah?
That's right. The city of Los Angeles is facing a budget deficit of nearly $1 billion.
That's a lot.
Yeah, it's an enormous shortfall since the total budget of the city is less than $14 billion. So the mayor is considering laying off thousands of workers and cutting numerous programs.
How did the city's deficit get so bad?
Yeah, a number of reasons. We had lower tax revenues in the last year, thanks in part to the devastating wildfires that destroyed Altadena and wreaked havoc in the Pacific Palisades. And the city's workforce has gotten really expensive. Cops, firefighters, electrical workers have all gotten a series of raises over the last few decades.
But there's one additional reason, isn't there?
That's right. A very Courthouse News reason. Lawsuits. The amount of money paid out by the city in settlements and judgments has been rising exponentially in the last few years.
Give me the numbers. Nothing
works in podcasting as well as a bunch of numbers. Here we go. In fiscal year 2021-22, LA paid out $91 million in settlements and judgments. Following year, $167 million. And the year after that, the last year we have data for, $255 million.
Wow.
And this year, LA is expected to pay out at least $320 million.
So nearly quadrupling in just 4 years, from $91 million to $320 million. Sounds like a jarring increase.
Yeah, and LA has been budgeting just $87 million for lawsuits in each of those years, which means the city's legal fees are nearly $250 million over budget, so that's a sizable piece of the deficit.
What kinds of suits are we talking about here?
Nearly a third of this liability payment money comes from lawsuits relating to the Los Angeles Police Department.
The infamous LAPD police brutality that we know about from rap and punk songs.
Yeah, a lot of excessive force lawsuits. Last year, a jury awarded the mother of a Navy pilot who was shot by police $24 million, one of the largest verdicts in the department's history. And did you hear about that incident where the LAPD bomb squad detonated a massive cache of fireworks in a residential neighborhood?
No, tell me more.
Yeah, cops packed nearly 40 pounds of homemade fireworks into this special, they call it an armored containment vessel, this big truck thing. So they were supposed to safely explode it in that, except they put too much in, and there was this massive explosion which damaged 22 homes and injured 17 people. Anyway, the city paid $21 million to settle claims arising out of that debacle. Also in 2024, there was this housing discrimination lawsuit the city settled for $39 million. And there's a significant chunk of this money that's going to liability over the city's crumbling infrastructure. Last year, a jury ordered the city to pay $21 million to a man who was hit on the head with a metal cap that fell from a street lamp.
What other kinds of lawsuits get filed over crumbling infrastructure?
Drivers whose cars get damaged when they hit big potholes will sue. That's a big one. But today, we're going to be talking about broken sidewalks.
Okay.
Every year, hundreds of Angelinos trip and fall on broken sidewalks or intersections, hurt themselves, and sue the city. In the fiscal year ending in 2024, LA paid out more than $19 million in settlements and judgments for a little more than 250 of these lawsuits. And that number, 19 million, is nearly double from 11 million 2 years before.
So, a small part of the city's legal liability, but a growing one.
Exactly. And these lawsuits, they're called trip and fall cases, but we're not talking about skin knees or bruises. Some of these injuries can be pretty bad. One attorney who described this to me is Mauro Fiore Jr., who has filed hundreds of these cases in Southern California.
Yeah, I mean, I've had a lot of people with bad head injuries that have changed their lives, when they fall, especially if people are out at night, they don't see a condition. I recently had a lady who, she had a intracranial hemorrhaging. They had to drill a hole in her head to relieve the pressure. And then she had lots of side effects from the concussion and the hemorrhage in her brain. She had trouble talking for a while. She had trouble smelling, like her sense of smell is permanently affected. So people have these falls that are caused by the city's negligence, and some of them are devastatingly injured, a life-altering injury.
I gotta say, when I hear about trip and fall or slip and fall cases in the court dockets, I assume the injuries aren't that bad, and those lawyers are probably getting their clients to exaggerate them.
Yeah, I mean, I feel the same way. There's this other lawyer I talked to, Chris Ardalan. He won a $3.2 million jury verdict for a client who broke his ankle. That might not sound like much until you hear about the details of the case.
Well, it was in a gutter area where the driveway from the sidewalk, and there was asphalt that meets it, and they had put patching over the area because the driveway had dilapidated, and there was a 4-inch pothole, and it was filled with water. My client was, I think, a 42-year-old mechanic. He was running to his car in the rain. He had his coat over his head, and it looks flat because it's wet. There's water in there. He steps in this 4-inch depression and gets a shattered ankle, had a couple of surgeries. And they could have settled the case. They didn't. They pushed it. They tried to blame they brought in the business owner, blaming the business. We got the $3.2 million verdict against them.
Now, most of these cases don't go to trial, and most of the settlements aren't in the 7 figures, but a lot of them are in the 6 figures.
And the city is pretty quick to settle these cases?
You would think so, but no, at least according to the attorneys I spoke with. Before you file a lawsuit against the city, you have to file something called an administrative claim. And these are almost always rejected out of hand. Here's attorney Mauro Fiore again.
Some of these cases that I have litigated, I would have settled the cases for probably half of what it costs, their cost to litigate the case. So instead of settling the case reasonable up front, after they receive a claim, they deny all the claims kind of just out of hand, and then they have to pay all the defense costs, and then they have to settle the case too. So it costs the city more money because the city never will have someone call you up and try to settle a case with you without a lawsuit. So they want you to file a lawsuit against them on every case.
Why do you think they do that?
I don't know. I mean, a lot of cities will settle cases. City of LA doesn't.
And here's the other attorney, Chris Ardalan.
The city of Los Angeles is an interesting entity. They don't typically settle early. And part of the problem is there's a lot of these claims that vary in terms of the severity of the injury that's being handled. The city allocates a certain budget annually to deal with these cases. And, as last year, for example, they ran out of money to settle cases very early. And it became a huge issue in terms of them having to potentially sell off some bonds to get additional funds because they didn't budget enough for these lawsuits. Most of the time, the cases that do get filed tend to have people that have broken bones, had surgeries, significant injuries. And the city has a defensive posture sometimes where I think they feel like, oh, this is just evil lawyers coming after us and, trying to take our city money from us.
So the injuries have to be pretty bad to get a sizable payout. Are LA sidewalks really that bad?
Yeah, they really are. The city estimates that there are somewhere around 9,000 linear miles of sidewalk, and that of that, roughly half are in various states of disrepair.
So more than 4,000 miles of broken sidewalks.
Yeah, and that's a very rough estimate since LA hasn't done an inventory of its sidewalks, unlike a lot of other cities. And you're probably wondering why the sidewalks here are in such bad shape.
Isn't it just because LA is so famously car-centric? Nobody walks in LA. That's what the New Wave song says, right?
Yeah, well, I do think that is part of it. LA spends about twice as much fixing up its streets than it does its sidewalks. One problem is that the city doesn't actually own the sidewalks, or at least most of them.
Really?
Yeah, homeowners, believe it or not, typically own everything from their properties all the way to the street. I own a home, and I didn't even know about this until I was doing the story. Yet, despite this weird rule, sidewalks are still public spaces. The city has a legal right to access them for things like utilities and a responsibility to make the sidewalks accessible for everyone. But the city can still technically hold property owners responsible for maintaining the sidewalks, although it never really has.
It's not very practical.
Right, it's not very efficient to have homeowners fixing like 12 feet of sidewalk. Anyway, I spoke to Jessica Meany. She's the executive director for a nonprofit called Investing in Place, which advocates for improvements to public spaces.
The city has not funded or invested or held property owners accountable for sidewalks in over 50 years. So the degradation and the buildup is quite enormous. We're talking 500 square miles, which is a tremendous size of an infrastructure with really no inventory, no finance plan, no substantial plan to manage them. And the streets see a lot of our infrastructure dollars, our local return from things like Measure M, Measure R. They are part of our transportation network. However, sidewalks are not considered part of LA's transportation network, and you can even see it in the way the city bureaucracy is organized. The Department of Transportation has no purview of what goes on our sidewalks. They are focused on the roadbed, so they're focused on moving cars and buses and people riding bikes as fast as possible through things, but they are silent in anything that's going on our sidewalks.
Now, there's one more cause of LA's sidewalk woes, and that is the trees.
You mean the ones with roots that push up sidewalks and break them like miniature earthquakes?
Yeah. LA has more than 1 million trees, including a great many Indian laurel fig trees, also known as the ficus tree. Most of them were planted in the 1950s and 60s by housing developers because they grow quickly. And these are big, strong trees, and they can grow really wide. Some of them like huge mushroom clouds. They can cover the entire width of the street. So they provide a lot of shade, which is good because LA gets really hot in the summer. But the roots of the ficus tree kind of flare up and above the ground, and they push up whole sections of the sidewalk.
And this is the thing about Los Angeles, isn't it? It's constantly in conflict with nature, and nature, more often than not, seems to have the upper hand.
Yeah, no, I think that's right. And you saw that with the wildfires earlier this year. At any rate, these trees apparently aren't so bad on sidewalks as long as you manage them, if you trim their branches and their roots.
And LA doesn't do that.
No, it does not. Here's Jessica again.
LA City, I think trees are supposed to be trimmed every 5 years. I think last time I looked, LA City is on a rotation of about every 17 to 20 years, probably even more so longer with the recent budget cuts and things like that.
So how much money does LA spend on fixing its sidewalks?
About $40 million a year. And the only reason it's that much is because of a class action settlement that was signed in 2015. That lawsuit was filed on behalf of all people with mobility disabilities who had trouble getting around because of the bad condition of the sidewalks, as well as the lack of curb ramps. Here's one of the lead attorneys on the case, Paula Perlman.
We were getting complaints from class members of not being able to get off their block because there were no curb ramps. We were getting complaints from people who were using the street instead of the sidewalks because there were so many vertical uplifts in the sidewalks because of tree roots, because of lack of maintenance, because of not doing repairs, or because there were not curb ramps installed. And so our clients were, one, worried about being hit by cars, and two, feeling trapped that they couldn't leave their home independently. And because of that, we sued.
After 5 years of litigation, the city agreed to settle, and it pledged to spend $1.4 billion over 30 years. But the agreement wasn't to fix all the sidewalks, only certain sections where class members filed claims. According to the terms, the city fixes the parts of the sidewalk once it gets a complaint from someone with a disability, within 120 days. And the city isn't doing that. It's not even coming close. According to Perlman, there's a backlog of more than 5,000 requests.
Wow. And how many has the city fixed?
I mean, this is really incredible, but in the 8 years leading up to 2024, about 231. Here's Paula again.
We just, probably 6 months ago, just got notice from somebody who was a class member. And I think, she put in her request in early 2017, 2018, and she just got her sidewalk. And she was so excited to get it repaired. Other people, unfortunately, are still waiting.
I mean, in your mind, is the city abiding by the terms of its settlement?
No, I don't think the city is. I think the waiting times are too long. The expenditures are too great for what we're getting.
And what are these costs going to?
I think the costs are going to business as usual. And business as usual is not what the settlement requires. Some are very real things. Cost of labor has gone up. Cost of supplies, materials has gone up significantly, yes. But then we're seeing costs for a typical curb ramp of, marshaling the people to the site. they're charging me for that. People have to get to work. I don't get paid to go to work. I don't get paid. I get paid to go to work. I don't get paid to get from my home to my work site. Or why is the city charging the settlement for getting crews to a work site? Those kinds of things. So we feel like we're getting nickel and dimed. And as a result, that means fewer curb ramps are constructed and fewer sidewalks are repaired.
The plaintiffs in the city are currently in mediation over this case. If they can't reach an agreement, they'll go back to court.
So to recap, Los Angeles is spending about $40 million a year to fix its badly degraded sidewalks, but only in response to claims about specific areas made by class members. And even then, not in a timely manner. Meanwhile, they don't have any comprehensive, proactive program to simply fix the sidewalks all over.
As far as I can tell, that's right. Here's attorney Mauro Fiore again.
The city has deemed itself too big, and there's too many sidewalks to where they can't do anything proactively to fix sidewalks. All they do is react to claims or react to complaints. I've had people testify in court where they don't have any record for 50 years or more of not inspecting a specific street in the city of LA. 50 years back, they can't show that it was inspected in the last 50 years. And they try to justify that saying they don't have money to do that. But then I just stand up and tell the jury, they don't have money to inspect the sidewalk, but they had money to bring in 6 expert witnesses in this trial to try to tell you that my client injuries are bullshit, our claim is bullshit. So they spent $100,000 on expert witnesses on this case instead of spending $150 to patch the sidewalk. So if they don't have any money, it's certainly not because it's my client's fault. It's because of the way they spend the money.
You have this bizarre situation where LA is paying tens of millions of dollars to people who have hurt themselves walking on the sidewalk, but it's not spending the money to fix the sidewalk.
So the city is sort of like someone living paycheck to paycheck who can't afford to register their car, so they keep getting tickets.
Right, being poor is actually pretty expensive sometimes. And to a lot of us who have lived here a long time and who follow city politics, it feels very typical. There's no planning, there's no foresight, it's just running around trying to put out fires and hoping for the best.
What's the solution? Is it just to spend more money?
I think it probably is, which is tough because the city, like we said, is completely broke. But $1 billion spent now, or however much it would cost, could prevent tens of billions in future liability. Here's attorney Chris Ardalan.
The lawsuits are going to get more expensive. People are going to get hurt. I mean, the lawyers are getting more educated and sophisticated on how to try these cases. And really, I think that our community has come to an understanding that the harm that happens to someone's life is very valuable. It's much more valuable than the damage to a rim on a car. So the values that the verdicts are speaking to are letting them know you cannot put profits over safety, convenience over safety. Safety is important.
A lot of people hear about these trip and fall cases and they think, well, you should just watch where you're going. How hard can that be? But I know a lot of people who have hurt themselves walking. My dad, who's in his 80s, twisted his ankle walking on his own block. He even met with a lawyer about it, but he ended up not suing. Another person who hurt themselves was attorney Paula Perlman.
I was rushing downtown and I tripped. And I was like, this is a lot of blood. And I was running to catch the metro, the train, and I got in an Uber or Lyft or one of them, and I went to urgent care, and I had stitches. I did not file a tort claim with the city. I didn't.
Did you think about it?
No, I didn't. I was angry, but I didn't do it.
That's going to do it for this episode of Sidebar.
Many thanks to Mauro Fiore, Chris Ardalan, Paula Perlman, and Jessica Meany. And thank you, Josh.
Hey, thanks, man. And you be careful walking the streets of LA.
I will.
And a reminder that you can read all about the lawsuits bankrupting the city of Los Angeles, among other things, at courthousenews.com. On the next episode of Sidebar, this year marks the 10th anniversary of the Supreme Court's decision in Obergefell v. Hodges, which granted same-sex couples the constitutional right to marry. Reporter Kirk McDaniel takes us through a look back at the history of this landmark case and what the future holds for marriage equality.